This is Joe of Cloud First Labs. AS2 is an HTTP-based protocol used for electronic data interchange, or EDI, messages. It is very popular for business-to-business, or B2B, transactions due to its secure and cost-effective design. MuleSoft makes it straightforward to take advantage of the AS2 protocol for B2B EDI transactions via Anypoint Partner Manager. This video will show how to configure an AS2 endpoint in Partner Manager for receiving purchase orders from a B2B trading partner. Let's start out by taking a look at what this use case is going to look like. So this is a diagram showing kind of the Partner Manager setup that we've implemented at our company, in this case, Cloud First Labs, for this illustration. And we have external partners. They're already set up. So you see these white boxes are unchanged. So we've got these retailers that are already putting in purchase orders to our company, to Partner Manager. We already have HTTPS and FTP endpoints set up to receive their orders. What we're going to do in this video is add a new partner XYZ, who will submit X12850. Those are X12 purchase order requests. They're going to be sent via AS2, so to an AS2 endpoint. We're going to go ahead and do the steps to set that up. And you'll see over here, most of the changes are going to be in Partner Manager. And then under the hood, Partner Manager does some modifications to and creates a new application or a new API in Anypoint platform, and they might even modify an API or two. But that we don't have to worry so much about those. It all comes down to doing the proper configurations within Partner Manager, and Partner Manager under the covers handles this aspect. So ultimately, this new partner XYZ is going to send a request via AS2 to this new AS2 endpoint in our Partner Manager environment. And that AS2 endpoint is going to transform the incoming X12 message to a JSON purchase order message and pass it to a business process API, which in our case, it's just going to log the output. But in the real world, it would do something like, maybe it would be passing it ultimately down to a database and some information to the CRM, some to our ERP, maybe some other core system at our organization. This process API would take advantage of MuleSoft API-led connectivity and pass this on to system APIs, which ultimately get the data to the core systems that we care about in our business. So that is what we're going to illustrate in this video. Just to reiterate what we are going to do here, we are going to be setting up an AS2 endpoint in Anypoint Partner Manager for Cloud First Labs to receive purchase orders from new partner XYZ. To do this, you're going to see some commands on the screen here. What we're going to start out doing is creating some private keys and certificates, because the AS2 format depends on some certificate exchanges between trading partners. So, we're going to do this manually here. In the real world, the security teams at both organizations are going to be in charge of creating the certificates that are used and exchanged. And, both sides going to have to trust one another, basically. But in our case, we're going to do it from scratch, and we're just going to use self-signed certificates. So I've got some commands showing on the screen here for how to do this, and we're going to go ahead and run these. This first one is going to go ahead and generate a self-signed private key and certificate for Cloud First Labs, which is the company, the Partner Manager company that's going to be receiving this purchase order message. So I'm going to come here and open up a git bash, and I'm going to paste in that command that I just showed on the screen. It's an OpenSSL command. I'm going to enter a password here, re-enter it, And I'm going to remember this because I'm going to need to know it later. And then it's going to prompt me for some things. Country, I'm going to say US. I'm going to say Florida. Locality, Tampa. Organization name, Cloud First Labs. IT. I'm going to say cloudfirstlabs.com. And I'm going to put in my email address. Okay, that just generated a private key saved as Cloud First Labs private key.key and a public certificate saved as Cloud First Labs public cert.cert. And if we look at that certs AS2 video folder that I just opened up and it was empty, now we see those files are there. Okay, so that's one side of the equation. Also, the other side, the new partner XYZ side, is going to need their own private key and certificate. So I'm going to run effectively the same command, just with some different values to generate theirs. And again, in the real world, this would be done by the new partner XYZ team. They would probably even have the certificate signed by some kind of certificate authority, or it would at least conform to their security standards in some way. But in our case, doing it from scratch, we'll go ahead and run this. Once again, enter a passphrase, and I'm going to put in most of the same information, but for organization name, I'll change it up here and say new partner XYZ, say the IT department, and I'll say new partner XYZ.net. And I'll put my email address once again. Okay, so that generated a new partner XYZ private key and a new partner XYZ public key. I'll make note here that eventually we're going to come back around to this and we'll have additional steps for that private key because we're going to need it in P12 format, and we're also we're going to need it in a key store later. But we won't worry about that for now. We've got what we need set up at this point in time, and now we can move on to the next step, which is in DataWeave. With those private keys and certificates created, let's come in here to Partner Manager inside of Anypoint Platform. And here we are on our company main page. Let's create a new partner for new partner XYZ, the company that we're dealing with. So we'll come up here to create partner, new partner XYZ, identifier type. We're going to do an AS2 identity because they're going to use an AS2 endpoint. And we're just going to call this new partner XYZ. We'll create it. We'll have to use that later in a configuration when we test sending this out. While we're here, I'm going to create two additional identifiers because they're going to send X12 messages. They're going to send 850 messages. Those are purchase orders. But the main thing is they're going to be X12 messages. So we need X12 identifiers. So I'm going to go ahead and create an identifier value for the X12 GS portion as new partner XYZ, and one more for the X12 ISA portion. And we'll do a mutually defined, so ZZ qualifier, and we'll say new partner XYZ as the identifier value. Okay, so now we have our partner set up, and by default it says, we could either receive or send Edifact or X12 to this partner. What we need to do is configure a message flow for this partner. And so we're going to come here to message flows, new message flow, receive from partner, and we're going to select new partner XYZ, select. And now is where we're going to start the configuration for the AS2 endpoint. So to start out, select an endpoint. We are actually, now that we've created this partner, we need to create the endpoint itself. This is a previous AS2 endpoint. We're going to create one from scratch, so I'm not going to select any of these. Well, let's go ahead and do it new. do new AS2, and the endpoint name, we can, make it whatever we want. I'll leave it just with the default AS2 received from partners 7. And I'm going to deselect private port. Our organization, Cloud First Labs, we're set up on Cloud Hub 2.0, which does not have the VPC concept. It's got a very similar private space concept. But anyway, this references VPC. So I'm not going to use that because our environment uses Cloud Hub 2.0. So there's no VPC, no private port necessary here. I'm going to leave it as HTTPS, and I'm going to leave enforced security level as signed and encrypted. But now we've got to select a key store, the Cloud First Labs key store for encrypting and signing. So this is where we're going to use the private key and certificate that we just created. So I'm going to go ahead and do a new Cloud First Labs key store. I'll call it for video. And so that Cloud First Labs public certificate, wrong, here we go. So here we are, we're in the search AS2 video folder, and this is where we created the Cloud First Labs public certificate. Here it is. So you saw me create that a little bit ago. Again, in the real world, we're going to have, security teams kind of providing these certificates for us, but this shows how to do it all the way through to get a feel for it. And now the Cloud First Labs private key file. Here we go, Cloud First Labs private key.key. Again, we just generated this earlier in this video. And the key passphrase, this is going to be the same one that was entered in those steps where we created the key stores themselves. So if I enter valid information using those commands that we saw earlier and click create, partner private key created. Okay, that was successful. And now I'll go ahead and click save. That created the endpoint, the AS2 endpoint. But now this message flow needs the new partner XYZ certificate. So I kind of spoke to this briefly earlier, but AS2 requires that mutual authentication. So, new partner XYZ needs to provide its own certificate. So let's add it. Let's find the new partner XYZ public certificate. I'll name it XYZ public certificate. Click create. Okay, and now we have that applied. So now this endpoint is shaping up nicely. The next step, we're going to figure out what the source message is that's going to come into this endpoint. And this will be easy enough. You can see it's actually going to be this one. It's going to be this X12 850, and it's version 4010 of that 850 purchase order message. So ultimately, I'm going to select this, but I want to show you if I was creating it new, from scratch, what it would look like. We'd go new, format, X12. It's going to be an X12 version 4010 coming in. Message type, it's going to be 850. And 850 is in X12. That's a purchase order message. We're just going to use standard X12, 4010, 850. We don't need to customize at all. And we don't, for this example, we don't need to do any kind of customization of this reference identifiers and attributes mapping. So we'll leave that alone and click save. All right, in this case, it's failing because only one combination of standard version and schema is allowed per partner. So all that's saying is we already have X12, 4010, 850 set up. So I can't create it new. So I'll come back here and select this. It's using the standard 850 schema. So that configures what type of message is going to come in to this endpoint, and this endpoint is configured specifically with new partner XYZ's public certificate, and we know what kind of message is going to come through. We could send a 997 functional acknowledgement back to them if that's how we're set up with that partner, with new partner XYZ. But we would have to have an endpoint set up for that. So like you could drop it on an FTP. You could set up an HTTP endpoint. It really depends. But for the simplicity of this case, we're not gonna do the 997 functional acknowledgement for this example. But just know that you can do that very easily. But just to keep things shorter and easier, we're not going to do it in this case. So next we're going to look at the map, and this is basically how we're going to map, how we're going to convert the data that comes in on that X12 message and convert it into, we want it to be a JSON purchase order message that we ultimately send from here to this process API. And then the process API can do whatever it needs to with it under the hood. It can orchestrate it down to any of these systems. But we want it to be JSON format when it hits here. So this map step, will be the one to use DataWeave to convert it from the X12 format coming in to the purchase order JSON format going out to the process API. Let's open this up and look at what it's looking for. It's looking for a map. It says no map imported. So if we look, it's going to be looking for a DWL file, a DataWeave language file. I'm not going to develop the whole DataWeave file from scratch. If you've got any kind of MuleSoft experience, you know how DataWeave works. In our case, MuleSoft has put together an example found in Anypoint Exchange that has a transform going from the 850 purchase order X12 format into JSON. So I'm going to go find that here on Exchange. And I'm going to find that by searching for assets published by MuleSoft. And I'm going to search transform inbound EDI X12 850 purchase orders and X12 850 to JSON. Here we go. Transform inbound EDI X12 850 transactions to purchase order JSON. So I have previously downloaded this and I've got it in my Anypoint Studio. So let's go ahead and look at that. I'm looking for B2B demo. So they've got a nice little application here and it shows the X12 connector. If you want to see more from us from Cloud First Labs on using the X12 connector, we've got a good blog post and video on that. I'll show the link on the screen here. It's cloudfirstlabs.com/discover the power of MuleSoft and EDI X12 data transformation. Each one of those words has a hyphen in between it. It can also be found at cloudfirstlabs.com/blog. Also, I will pop the YouTube link up here onto the screen. They can be found right here in my Notepad++ screen. But anyway, I've downloaded this from Exchange, and as part of this, there is a DataWeave file. If we open it up, we'll see how this works. But X12 connector spits out a Java map as its output. So if we come back over here, this basically generates a map, and then it, the transform goes from that map into a JSON object. Well, they save that DataWeave here as a file inside of the example. And so we're just going to go ahead and use this file in our example. So if we in our Partner Manager configuration. So here where we've got new mapping file, I'm going to choose file, and I happen to throw this in the downloads folder. And I slightly renamed it. I took a couple things out, but it's the same file. So it's a data weave from an inbound purchase order, 4010-850, so that's X12 format, to JSON format. So I'm going to go ahead and upload that mapping. And yeah, so that, what is being configured here is the generation of, hey, what kind of message is going to come in the door? That's up here. Then here's how we're going to transform it. Now where are we going to send it to? We want to send it per this setup to this common business process API that can be used by all of our, no matter what the incoming format is, we want to convert it to JSON and then let it do its thing under the covers, send it to any further systems it needs to go to. So we need to configure our partner manager setup to send this to this process API. So let's come back over here and open up this target. First, we've got to tell it what kind of message we're going to be sending. And in this case, we see we've already got a JSON purchase order. I'll do a new one just to show how this works. But we're going to do a new message type. And in this case, this is going to be a JSON, it's JSON output from that data weave. So we want JSON. For the JSON schema file, I simply created an open brace, closed brace. This accepts any JSON. So, any kind of JSON is going to validate against this schema, and I saved it as purchase order 2.schema. So if we come back over here, I'm going to find that. I saved it as purchase order 2.schema, and gives it a name. We'll save it. So that is the intended message type to be delivered to this endpoint. So what endpoint? Well, here, what we can do is we can configure this to be delivered to a process API that we have already deployed to Runtime Manager. And let's look at this API. I've got a kind of a dummy API here. So I don't really have, for this illustrative purpose, I don't have this doing all of these different things. I have this API just logging the output that it gets and then returning a 200 OK response. But, it could be implemented to do all of this work under the hood. But anyway, we'll see we have this deployed, and I've got it deployed to CFL example 200 API dash and then identifier. Here's our Cloud Hub URL. So we are going to use that to configure into our endpoint over here. Now, I do already have it set up. Here is HTTPS inbound target 1, but I'm going to do new just to show you how it works. I would paste this in, and the endpoint is sample-endpoint. So it's a very basic API, and it's a fake one, but it returns a 200 OK response. So we can set that up. I don't have it configured to require any kind of authentication at this point in time. So I'm going to say none. Of course, in a real scenario, you're going to want to configure some kind of actual authentication on this process API. But again, to keep it simple, to focus on the partner manager side of the house, that's what we've got here. So I'll go ahead, I'll click save. Okay, and this endpoint configuration already exists for inbound target 1 in this environment. So, that's how I would set it up, but it's already set up. So we'll select this, and you'll see it's putting it in that same URL. And we will hit select. And with this, X out of that red box, with this, we've got everything configured that we need configured for our partner manager setup. So I'm going to go ahead and hit deploy, and it'll take a few minutes to deploy, but after it does, we will take a look at this in action and see how it works. The application is now deployed, as we see here. And so let's look at Runtime Manager briefly. When we see here, there are some Partner Manager managed APIs. Let's look at Runtime Manager just to see what those are. So what was just deployed is this B2B inbound AS2 application. It's got an identifier here at the end. But B2B inbound AS2, this was just deployed. This is the API that's going to handle the actual incoming request. And then let's look at some of the other B2B applications or APIs that are out here. These are deployed by Partner Manager and managed by Partner Manager. We've got API Replication Service. This is used by any of these Partner Manager endpoints. Ultimately utilize both the API Replication Service and the Document Processing Service. We've got an inbound FTP application. That's the one that would be used here for handling incoming FTP. Likewise, inbound HTTP, that would be this one. Someone sending an HTTP message. And then, inbound AS2, that's the one we just deployed. And then we've got outbound FTP and outbound HTTP because we've set up for previous customers or trading partners, we've set up outbound FTP destinations and an outbound HTTP destination. This is what gets used if we look back here. This target, what delivers the message from this message flow to the process API is going to be this outbound HTTP application. So this is the one, the AS2 one is the one that was just deployed. And now that it is deployed, let's take a look at how to actually test this out. To test this out, we're going to hop over to Anypoint Studio, and we're going to use the AS2 connector that MuleSoft has so kindly built for us to enable us to easily send AS2 messages. If you don't already have the AS2 connector in your Mule palette, come over here to Search and Exchange and search for AS2 connector. Go ahead and add it. You could click Finish. I've already got it, so I don't need to actually click Finish here. I'll click Cancel. But we're going to use this AS2 connector. And we see there are a couple options. We're going to do Send with Sync MDN in this case. I want to call out the AS2 MIME type for what we're going to send to our sample AS2 receiver that we just set up in Partner Manager is application/EDI-X12. We're going to send the payload. So whatever payload gets sent to this application, this is just, again, kind of a dummy application that's going to run locally in order to generate an AS2 message appropriately. But then the key here is going to be our connector configuration. So let's take a look at this. The partner URL. So in this case, where do we want to send this to? We want to send it to this endpoint. So if we come to Partner Manager, and this is what we would provide to our trading partner in a real scenario. In our case, we're using our locally running application as that trading partner. So we click here, and this is going to give us the endpoint. So I'm just going to copy this and close. Okay, so we're going to send it to this URL. And the other important tab here is going to be the security tab. We've got our TLS configuration. That's all fine. But down here, we've got our self-config. So here, we need to configure what we are going to send across to the Partner Manager AS2 receiver. So AS2 partner name for self. So we're operating as the sender. So we want to be new partner XYZ in this case. This is what we set up previously in Partner Manager. So we see this identity. And Cloud First Labs is going to be the receiving AS2 identity. So let's go ahead and plug that in here. The X509 alias. The X509 alias is something we haven't actually set up yet. So we need to go do that now, and then we'll have the alias that we need. To get the alias that we need, we are going to run another command. I've got the command pulled up. It does more than just get the alias. It converts the certificates that we generated earlier, or the private key and the public key certificate. It converts those into a P12 key store file. So we're going to do that for the new partner XYZ private key. And then we will also run a command to import the Cloud First Labs public key, the certificate, into that same P12 key store file. And we'll use the alias from each of those. So the alias for the first one is going to be new partner XYZ. The alias for the Cloud First Labs public certificate is going to be Cloud First Labs, and we will configure that into the configuration here. But let's go ahead and run these commands. So if I grab this, so they're both OpenSSL commands. I'm going to paste them in. You can see on the screen what it is. And I'm entering a new password for the newly generated certificate, for the newly generated P12 file, new partner XYZ.P12. And if we look here, there it's been generated. So with that being the case, we need to run one more command. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up in Keystore Explorer just so we can see it. And I'm going to use the password that I just created for it. And we see we have a key pair entry here for the new partner XYZ private key. But we also want to do one more thing. We want this key store, because we're going to configure this in down here below in the key store configuration. This also needs to mutually, it's mutual authentication for this AS2 connection. We need to import the public certificate for the Cloud First Labs public certificate so that it's got the mutual authentication ability. It's got the private key for new partner XYZ. It's got the public key for Cloud First Labs to enable that transfer. The same way on the other end, the receiver has the private key for Cloud First Labs and the public key for new partner XYZ. So how do we do that? We're going to run a key tool import command to import into that new partner XYZ P12 key store file the Cloud First Labs public certificate. So I'm going to go ahead and run this command, paste it in here. Enter the key store password, and that's the one I just entered when I created the P12 file before, and we see that the certificate was added to the trust store. So now if we look at it with Keystore Explorer, the same way I did a minute ago, and it just had the one certificate, or the one key pair. Now it's got a public cert for Cloud First Labs. It's got the key pair for new partner XYZ, which includes the private key, and we are all set. So this is now configured the way we need it. I'm just going to move it into our application. So I'm going to move it into source main resources here. And now within our configuration, we are going to do a couple things. So instead of, we're going to plug these in as new partner XYZ, the X509 alias. Again, if we were to open this up, or if we looked at that command that we ran, we're going to see these aliases, new partner XYZ and Cloud First Labs. So, even these don't have to be the same. In our case, they are the AS2 partner name and X509 alias, but these aren't actually related fields. This is what's configured as an identifier between the organizations as an AS2 identifier. This is the alias within that key store that we just looked at. And then we can set a couple things up here. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to say subject EDI data from new partner XYZ to Cloud First Labs. And then I'm going to enter the key store password that was just created for that P12 file. And now that we've added it into our project, I'm going to reference new partner xyz.p12. And now we have our configuration set up. So this application should be able to run locally and send an AS2 message to the endpoint that we have configured in Partner Manager. So let's take a look at that. We will test this out by deploying this application. And once we deploy the application, we're going to send a request to this locally running application to this endpoint, and whatever payload we send there, it's going to send on via AS2 to that AS2 receiver that we configured in Partner Manager. So I'll fast forward to where this has deployed successfully, and then we'll run a request. Okay, this deployed successfully. So now let's come here and we see this is an X12 850 purchase order message. And we see it's going from new partner XYZ to Cloud First Labs. So I will go ahead and hit send. And boom, we see it got back content. This is kind of MDN content. It's part of the AS2 protocol. It came back, so we can see the reporting UA was the MuleSoft AS2 connector. We see Cloud First Labs was the recipient, so on and so forth. So what does this look like within Partner Manager? Well, let's take a look. We refresh, we look at our recent transmissions, and hey, we have a message. We received a message, and we see it's in delivered status. So we can click into this if we want, and we can even see the source payload. So here's that X12 payload, and then we can see the target payload. So here's what it looks like after it was transformed from that X12 into JSON. And then this was delivered to the process API at this HTTPS inbound target. So just to drive this home, let's go ahead and look at Runtime Manager. And let's see what we've got in that example 200 API. This is serving as our process API. This is kind of this layer. And that if it was fully implemented, it can be doing all of this under the hood, delivering to all these different systems. In this case, it's just going to log the message, but we can see our API that we deployed here. Boom. It logged that message. So all of that goes to show how you can configure Partner Manager to do this. And you can have all sorts of different messages. It's not limited to just purchase orders or anything by any means. Any kind of X12 messages, NFX messages, B2B messages, Partner Manager makes it really easy to configure and get a whole bunch of partners set up. And it's really traceable. You can come in, you can find all of these details about all of the different applications. You can have different configurations per trading partner. It's a really smooth setup process. So this is how you do it for AS2. And this video has been showing how easily you can handle your EDI B2B needs with MuleSoft via Partner Manager. So if you have any questions, hit us up at cloudfirstlabs.com, and we would love to help you with your business to business needs. Thank you.